Welcome to the Rants Live. Welcome to the show, everybody, on the Tuesday, December 20th, right before Christmas. And here we are. Our last episode, we were complaining that the Cubs weren't doing anything because, in fact, they weren't doing anything. But now they have done something. They have signed not just Cody Bellinger, but they have signed Dansby Swanson, which really was kind of it had to be done. It felt like it had to be done in order to save what would have otherwise been a mutiny at Cubs convention. So good thing for them that they did that, because I couldn't even have imagined what CubsCon would have been like had they not at least gotten one of the four shortstops and continued upon their alleged spending intelligent ways. Which I mean, 7 years, $177 million compared to what everybody else was getting is actually a really good deal. Here's the thing that I don't understand. Like, if you look at Carlos Correa's numbers, he's not a superstar. I would not define him as a superstar. B, what did he have? Like 16 home runs last year, like 65 RBIs. I mean, his numbers were not like $350 million contract numbers. And Swanson's were, I mean, Swanson is I mean, if you just look at the numbers, he's better than Correa, I think.
Well, for 1 year, I think the issue with it is, if you look over the course of his career, now we can make arguments in different directions, right? But when Swanson just set a career high of 116 WRC plus, I think Correa's average is like 130. From an offensive standpoint. Now,
defensively, let's talk defense.
Defensively, I mean, you had the highest outs above average by any shortstop. Now, again, that was in Gold Glove, and that was, again, better than he had ever done before. He's still young enough, though, that you don't look at that and say, oh, man, well, you did this when you were 32. That'll never happen again. And so you put him and Horner up the middle. I think that's helpful. He's played, I think, in all but maybe like 5 games over the last few seasons, something like that. He's very durable. And they say the greatest ability is your availability. So that is big. And I know there are concerns with Correa health-wise. Now, how much of that is legit? Because he's played through a lot of that stuff, too. It's like they said that about Anthony Rizzo, right, with his back. We've heard that a lot. But he still plays, and again, that's big. But when you're talking about literally half the money over just about half the years, barely over half the years. I mean, Correa's got $350 for 13 years. And so going 177, and I think, and here's what I suspect happens.
He'll have a walker by the time he retires.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, that's what's wild, is that when I look at Swanson, I think, we heard the Cubs talking, but we knew they didn't want to go very deep on years. I saw somewhere where they were stuck at like 6 years or something. And I think, there were thoughts, at least. I don't know if this is just mine and other speculation, or if this is where things were starting to go. And it makes sense that Swanson was probably looking for like 8 years, $200 million. And if the Cubs were looking at 6, it makes a whole lot of sense that those were kind of where the two sides were. And the Cubs were like, hey, here's the deal. How about 7, 177, slightly higher AAV than 8, 200, and we'll throw in a full no trade. Done. And I think Swanson very much wanted to be in Chicago with his wife playing soccer there.
Yeah.
The seasons are almost identical. And I think that's the big thing, right? You see, it's not often that you have two professional athletes who are married playing different sports that also share that same season. Like, I know what JJ Watt's wife, I think, plays for the Red Stars as well, but football has a different season, right? The NWSL is basically March through September, March to October, just like the Major League Baseball season. So if you're newlyweds and you're saying, hey, honey, I know we got the same season, but you know what? I'm going to go play in Seattle and you're in Chicago. I know it's the life of a professional athlete is difficult enough as it is being on the road all that often, let alone two professional athletes. And so then you're like, when are you ever going to see each other? So I really do think they had, as a couple, had prioritized Chicago. And I think that probably was part of him maybe. I mean, hell, 177 is way more than anybody thought he was going to get going into this market, but relatively speaking, you figure he probably could have gotten more and maybe even had bigger offers. So, but I like it. I mean, he comes across as they called him the sheriff. Freddie Freeman did anyway. I mean, he's a guy who's been around for a little while, holds people accountable, works hard. And Michael Cantor made a really great observation when he looked at that and kind of compared him. Again, I think he was careful not to say like, oh, he's going to be as good as Ryan Sandberg. But when you look at his improvements at the plate, in the field, this is a guy who works at his craft, who wants to be better, who isn't necessarily the most physically. He's obviously very physically gifted, right? I mean, the dude went to Vanderbilt. He was a top draft pick. He's very, very talented. But it's not because he's so athletically superior. I think a lot of it is because he is a hard worker who does take pride in his craft. And I think that's something that's going to stand up well as far as the test of time over these next few years. You pair him up with Nico Horner up the middle, and, you get a huge upgrade with Bellinger in center. Man, I have to like it. I mean, we don't have any other choice at this point, but I do like where these things, how these things match up.
Well, so I started looking at defensive value. It's the DEF on Fangraphs, which basically league average is 0. And so for every 10 runs above 0, every 10 runs, it equals about 1 WAR. And so I looked at the Cubs defense in 2022, and at second base, their DEF, their defense value, was minus 3.6. Center field was minus 7.7, and shortstop was 16.4. And so then so that was a combination of 5.1 total value there. I went and I looked at the Braves DEF score for last year at shortstop was 20.7. So better defense than Nico. Dodgers center field was 5.9. I don't know how much Bellinger was in there, but when I add those together, so when I add the Swanson, the Dodgers center field, and Nico together, I get a combined 43. So you go from 5.1 to 43. That's about a 37.9 defensive runs. That is about 4 WAR. That's huge.
That's really huge. I mean, that's well, and how many games, right? So they still need to add offense, and I know they're still working to do that.
Yeah, exactly. And this is just defensive,
right?
Value that we're looking at.
This improves a lot when you also talk about. So they're bringing Drew Smiley back in. They got Jameson Tyon, who's not as big a ground ball guy necessarily, but they got a lot of ground ball pitchers. They got a lot of guys who don't, who survive on getting outs via contact. And so I think if you just look at that in a vacuum, improving the defense, which we all said they needed to do last year anyway, with the similar pitching staff, right? And they didn't, and they had an atrocious defense. Center field was awful. They were terrible at third. Second base was not good. And now you've improved 2 of those markets. You've actually, theoretically, you've improved shortstop over even Nico Horner, who should have been an all-star and in the Gold Glove conversation. But now you move Horner to second. So now you've got legitimate Gold Glove caliber defenders at all 3 of those positions up the middle, and depending on what they do at catcher, you could bring in somebody else who's won a couple Gold Gloves there. Now we can discuss that at some point. And a lot of people, I think, are up in arms about just the mere idea of adding Tucker Barnhart, which is funny to me because when's the last time anybody cared about a backup or a split time catcher, and what happens with it? Oh, he's not as good a hitter. Like, yeah, no crap. But anyway, the steps that they've made, while they haven't improved the offense yet, and I think they still have some chances to make some improvements there, the better defense does help to remove a lot of the luck that they introduced and a lot of the either good or bad fortune they introduced by having just terrible defense.
Well, and like I said, we're not even talking about offensive improvements that have been made. I mean, at second base, definitely offensively, that's been improved for the Cubs because their offense wasn't good there. I didn't look at the stats. I could look them up, and obviously center field wasn't a strong offensive position for them either. And so, of course, there's the downside of what has happened to Bellinger over the last couple of years. I personally think he gets that figured out. I think he hits over 20 home runs this year. And I think that average comes up probably closer to, 260, I would guess. And so we'll see, I mean, playing in Chicago is different than playing in Los Angeles, just from an emotional perspective. You go out there as a baseball player and you're playing at Wrigley Field. It's a lot different than playing in Los Angeles. I mean, Los Angeles is very, very kind of, this, I don't want to say it's plain necessarily, but it's kind of got that big box feel to it. Whereas Wrigley is kind of like, the comfort of mom's home cooking kind of thing.
Yeah, it's a chain restaurant versus, well, of course they've done a lot to turn Wrigley into a chain restaurant, and I've actually used that analogy before. But I think the other big thing with Bellinger is just being healthy, right? I mean, he came off the shoulder issues. I know he's been doing a lot of work, and I don't want to mess this up, but I think it might be with Trey Hannum, who's a hitting coach that's out there. I think that guy might be, I don't remember if he's at Arizona State or if that's where he works out of. There were some videos out there of Bellinger working out in his swing, and everything looks pretty good, but he jacked up his swing, in part due to a series of shoulder dislocations that a lot of people, it culminated, and a lot of people saw this because in the NLCS, he was celebrating a homer, and he did that little arm bump thing, like the elbow, hooking the elbow bumps in with Kike Hernandez, and separated his shoulder doing that. Right. So a lot of people were like, oh my God, how hard did he hit it? Well, the issue is that, as anybody knows, if you've had a shoulder dislocation, let alone many of them, things in there can get a little bit loose. And so it makes it very easy to have subsequent dislocations. The fact of the matter is, he was so used to it that he actually had them pop it back into place right after it happened. And he continued to play. He played through the World Series. Right. So like the whole thing from Lethal Weapon, when he's like, or you see it in other things where they're like, you just bite down on something and have them pop it back in. Like, look, man, I get being tough, but that's a whole different side of, like, who knows. But a lot of it's just about like, yeah, I'm used to it. Boop, pop it back in. Let's go. And so he had that fixed. As anybody who's had surgery can tell you, that doesn't necessarily mean that all of a sudden you feel great about things, like mentally. Because if you've had surgery on something, it could be that because it's weakened right afterwards because you haven't done anything with it. So that joint feels different. It may work a little differently. You may be afraid with that right arm, as you extend that's his front arm on his swing that's getting extended. Does he slow down? Is he unable to cut that loose? And then I guess he also had a stress fracture, I think, in his leg. And that may have caused pain and issues. So if you're planting on that, you're trying to swing. So he's had the last few years. We're talking about that happening in 2020. And then the last two, he's coming back from repercussions from that injury and subsequent surgery. And then the leg thing. So there's a lot about that I think if he's healthy and in a better space mentally, who knows? I don't believe we'll get him back to, we'll see a guy who's at that MVP caliber play. But my goodness, if he's just anywhere close, better than what he's been the last two seasons, he's still a plus player with the defense and the base running and everything else. So you're talking about an exceptional athlete. So I think he'll be pretty good.
Yeah, it should be good to see. And I mean, at the end of the day, that's really where the upside comes in for the Cubs on the offensive side, right? Is what does Cody Bellinger do? Because, I mean, Nico has decent offense, but he's not great, right? I mean, I think his WAR was like close to 4 last year. And so that's not bad, but it's not 6 or 7, which is what Bellinger can give you. I think, he was up around 8, I think, his MVP year. And so that's a flash of, we don't need him to be up there. That's for sure. We just need him to be, right around 3 or 4, I think would be an improvement for the Cubs. And so I don't think you're really asking for all that much, but I mean, with Bellinger, right, there had to be something going on in LA. And I know you talk about the injuries, but I think just above and beyond the injuries, there had to be something. I mean, in 2021, he had a 165 average, and in 2022, he had a 210. I mean, that's crazy for somebody who, in his MVP year had a 305 average. I mean, there has to be an explanation for that. That doesn't just happen for no reason.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's more than
it's got to be more mental.
Yeah, I think it's very much, and a lot of that manifests itself physically, obviously, right? And who knows? I mean, is that Is there an anxiety thing? Is there a toxic relationship of is there some family stuff that's going? I mean, who knows how these things can be protracted over time? And when you put that in with some very obvious known physical issues, then and that's part of it. Is like, okay, it may have started as a physical issue, and now, what we heard about Matt Mervis, right? When we talked about it on here as well, you're pressing, and so the things that you're trying to do mentally are hampering you physically. So can that be part of it? Are you pushing too hard and then you end up hurting something else, like we saw with Brennan Davis with the back issue and the stress reaction? So there's so much there that I think the potential for a get right, and sometimes I think we overblow the idea of a change of scenery, but I do believe there are situations in which that's very real. Not just because like, oh, I'm in a different place, but because being in a different place helps you to reset some things psychologically and put you in a better mental space. I've been there before, you know what I mean? At just like a job change or something like that, and just you realize that you were in a situation that was toxic to your psychological well-being and your mental health, and you get out of that, you change, and bam, things just turn around for you behaviorally and all these other ways. So I don't know what's going on there with Bellinger, what was going on, but I think he's going to be in a better place when he's with the Cubs here this coming season.
Yeah, I agree. And so we'll see how that all plays out. The other thing that we need to really be concerned about, I think, and really to me, I mean, I think the Cubs are fine positionally pretty much everywhere else. I mean, yeah, you could add a backup catcher, but Higgins is fine. And I think he's, at least an average, if not above average backup for sure. And he has the potential for that bat to really lift him. But where I'm concerned is third base. And I just don't know what the Cubs are going to end up doing there at third, because defensively, you start talking about how good they are up the middle now, but then you look over at third base and it's just, man, it's a drop off. I mean, Morel had like his defensive rating last year was minus 5.1. And Wisdom was I'm sure worse than that, because neither of them were real good. And so minus 10.8 for Wisdom. And so, I mean, that's a glaring weakness for the Cubs. They have to do something, right? I mean, if you're signing, a guy like Swanson, you're committing for 7 years, and you've got Suzuki there, and you've got some other guys that you've committed to. You've got Stroman, who knows how long he'll be around for, what he could fall off next year. But you want to be able to add to this, but you want to be able to win this year. And I mean, I think with the team they've got right now on paper, I think they could be about a 500 team. But they won 74 last year. And so, yeah, they could win 81 this year, maybe with the improvements that they've made, maybe a little bit more, depending on how the pitching goes, but they've got to shore up third.
Yeah. And it's really interesting. This is one of those topics that you could ask a few different people, and, some folks are still really sold on Morel, and if he could get a chance there, I continue to say I like him much better as a utility type guy. Somebody who can
for sure
play
100%.
Most of the time just at different spots, because he was pretty brutal in center. He was brutal at third. You can hide him at second, but he clearly doesn't have a spot there anymore. And if you keep Madrigal but I guess the issue there too is you've got Mastroboni and McKinstry, who are both still on the roster for now. Now, once the Smiley signing and the Swanson signing are finalized, the Cubs are at 41 men on the 40-man roster. Somebody's getting DFA'd or traded or whatever, right? They're going to have to make other moves because they're still adding. They could add Trey Mancini, Michael Conforto. Talk about third base. That could be maybe Evan Longoria or Brandon Drury. I mean, there are other guys out there. I would like to see them, whether that's like a 1-year deal for a veteran who listen, Longoria is going to be like 38. He's nowhere near the caliber that he was back in the day with the Rays. But if you get a dude in there who can hold that down on an everyday basis, you can shift now, of course, if you do that and you get Mancini, then I don't know where Wisdom goes at that point. I feel like he would probably be able to be traded because otherwise, where do you go? And, So again, there's several moving parts to it, but I do think having someone, and you know what's weird about Wisdom too is like that year that he busted out, right? 2021, I think he led all third basemen in outs above average. I mean, it was crazy, because now how much of that is just dumb luck over less than a full season? I don't know. How much of last year was that? Not sure of that either. But I do think what they're looking to do is improve through defense and pitching. And I've also noted, and Wisdom's a good dude, so this isn't anything to do with that, but it's really obvious they've targeted players who are great clubhouse presences, who have those leadership qualities, who have demonstrated that, and who so you look at Jamison Tyon, my goodness, like everybody, there's nobody that's got even close to, not even like he's okay. Like everybody loves this dude. He is awesome. I mean, Swanson seems like a leader. You look at a Trey Mancini, who it sounds like they're really targeting. Here's a dude who's beaten cancer and who all his teammates and the fans of the Orioles all love. Everybody, and so they're going out and getting some of these guys, not because that chemistry aspect is going to win them another 5 games or anything like that. But I think when you're talking about building something where you do have kind of a transient sort of, hey, some of these guys are veterans, they're not around that long necessarily. They're moving in and out. You get bringing young guys in too. You don't want people who are going to rock the boat. You want folks who are going to come in and really be able to kind of assimilate into things, even if they know they're not going to be there for that long. People who want to be there. So yeah, I'm interested in it, but third base is definitely a spot because, even over there at first, Matt Mervis is going to be a rookie. He's still learning the position. He's admitted as much. Mancini, not a great defensive player. If you've got him over there, so if you platoon those guys, you've got to really have somebody over there at third who can pick it. So I think that's important.
Javi.
Hey, dude, I'm telling you, a lot.
Javi.
You talk about someone. There is no more polarizing player right now because nobody looks at that. Like I wasn't even really joking when I said, hey, go swing a trade with the Tigers, put him over at third with Swanson and Madrigal, Swanson and Horner, and good luck getting the ball through the infield, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's pretty wild, but it's so funny to me how many people are like, I hate that guy. He sucks. All he does is strike out. He could be, as long as your first baseman's 10 feet tall and is a Gold Glover, he's okay. And then everybody's like, hell yeah, let's go do it. Like, there's nobody in between. It's like, whatever.
No, there's not.
Like,
dude, I got to tell you, when Javi was playing third base, I thought that was his position. Obviously, he was great at shortstop, but he was very good at third base when he was in there playing third. And I mean, he made some spectacular plays, and he is very, very capable at that position. Yeah. So,
dude, I tell you what, you
get Detroit to eat that salary.
That'd be a hell of a lot of fun. Yeah, get them to eat some of it. They've already moved off of some other dudes. I mean, who knows? And like I said, the Cubs have got some additional dudes on that 40-man roster that they're going to need to get rid of. Maybe you swing them over and
yeah,
kind of
there you go. Send them Nick Madrigal.
Yeah, here's Madrigal and Master Boney and McKin, M dudes. Let's probably not all 3 of them, and Morel.
You can send him Wisdom,
right? Yeah. Hey, here's Patrick Wisdom and Nick Madrigal. I mean, it's basically like, it's when you take some stuff to Goodwill because you're like, this is still pretty good, but it doesn't fit in my house anymore. Or we got a couple things, for Christmas and the kids' old dressers don't fit anymore, but they're still good. So here you go. Take this. You know what I mean? Whoa, somebody's getting mean on here.
Somebody's getting banned.
I don't know who that's. Well, let's wait and see what old John Meager is. Who's he getting after here?
Somebody just told us to get a life. Anyways, but yeah.
Well, Javi, they may have been replying to someone. Maybe Anuj Patel, our buddy, he's frequent here. Or Eric, he's also a frequent. They're cool, but maybe John thinks they need to get a life. Not you, John. This John. But anyway, yeah. I mean, I think the Cubs have a bunch of dudes. Not the Detroit. I mean, hell, it's the Tigers. What are they? But they might be interested in picking up a few dudes who are versatile, who can play a bunch of those spots, who aren't making much money, right? That's where these guys all slide in. Hey, you're talking about a bunch of pre-arb or near pre-arb players, or just nearing arbitration. You can unload Javi's money. on that long term to get a few dudes who are versatile and making very little, they might be interested in that after handing out that big money last year. I would just love, and hey, from the Cubs perspective, you talk about putting butts in seats, trying to sell tickets, trying to make something exciting, do something for CubsCon and beyond. Again, are they making a trade for Javi just to to get people excited at CubsCon, get them off Ricketts back? No, but my goodness, you could have some incredible defense on the infield, and that would help.
That would be very, very helpful, I think, and it would be just helpful from the perspective of kind of Cubs fans' mentality. And I think you're closer, right? I mean, I know people think we're crazy because you talk about Javier Baez, but Javier Baez is an excellent defender. He's very well liked in Chicago. Detroit would definitely eat some of that salary. I don't know what their salary level is at right now, but it's nowhere near the cap. And it just makes a lot of sense to be able to do, but they've got to do something, I guess is the point, right?
I don't think the likelihood of it, and this is, again, I assume Kevin is referencing the Javi deal. At no point have I espoused the idea that it will or necessarily is likely. It's just really fun to talk about. And
exactly,
if we can't have fun with stuff like this time of year, then what's the point, right? And man, I tell you what, though, boy, Facebook in particular, but there are a lot of people who just really, really take this part of the season and themselves very seriously. And I'm not referring to Kevin here. I'm referring to like when the Cubs picked up Ben DeLuzio, right? And my opening line was Ben DeHuzio. So clearly, but I said, the Cubs finally get revenge on the Cardinals for signing Wilson.
How dare you joke about something so serious? Cubs baseball is life and death.
Hilarious. How many people were like, "What kind of an idiot are you? What are you, moron? This isn't revenge. This is stupid. You're an idiot." I'm like, boy, the joke just like I get when sarcasm is difficult to detect, but folks, that's about as obvious as it gets. And there were so many people who were like literally upset about that, like just mad online. And again, I think that's part of that was that was pre-Swanson, right? So Cubs fans in general were like, they were in a bad way for a while there, man. It was rough.
Yeah.
But I think this is definitely helpful. A couple more moves, but all of them right now, here's the only other issue I have is that the moves they're making, like they all are.
They gave John a chance. He's done. He's gone.
Yeah, that's just blah, blah, blah. But it's all, they're steps in a positive direction. They're just not really big steps, and they're all still predicated on them having to make additional moves to really round things out more, right? So, you had the stuff last year, and again, Stroman and Suzuki, very good, very solid additions, not the kind that put you over. Swanson, big addition, still not quite, again, helps tremendously. Jameson Taillon, great addition, great dude. I think Cubs fans are going to love him. I think that's going to be awesome, but not the, again, he's maybe a number 3. Maybe he, and I think he's got some untapped potential. He admitted as much. So, yeah, the next year is going to have to see them add even more, which they should be able to do because of a ton of money coming off. You probably have Pete Crow Armstrong coming up. Mervis has another year under his belt. Brendan Davis at some point this year, hopefully, whatever happens with Canary, they've got some more prospects coming. They've got some more money that they need to spend. They have to continue to spend money in a meaningful way, right? When they can get, because that's how the game works. When you can go out there, you either have to develop a superstar or you got to go pay for a superstar. And I don't know about you, I don't believe they've got a true superstar in there. I mean, when you talk about being able to promote a guy who becomes MVP, and he was Rookie of the Year, and we got Javi finishing second in MVP, and you've got Gold Glovers and All-Stars who are coming up through your system.
Chris Bryant,
and Schwarber mashing home runs all over. those are some dudes who were superstar level players that they were able to bring up, immediate impact, take you to a World Series type guys. I think Pete Crow Armstrong is a future Gold Glover, but there isn't nearly, Brennan Davis, I think we have to be very skeptical about. And I'm not as concerned with like, will he be healthy? I'm just looking at it going, the dude didn't specialize in baseball through high school, which is fine. I don't think he should have, but he only started really focusing on baseball once he got drafted. And he's had so many little things that have come up. My issue is not the injuries themselves and what that means for his health. It's the lost developmental time. Miguel Amaya, same thing.
Yeah.
Tons of lost developmental time. Braylon Marquez, tons of lost developmental time. You talk about three guys who were at one point or another the number 1 or 2 or 3 rated prospect in the system. And now, well, Davis is still up pretty high, but the other two have either fallen off completely or are way down below. No, I don't think Seiya Suzuki could play third base. That's a question out there. I don't think that's something they would ever plan on necessarily. But I'm not concerned by that. I think the farm can absolutely continue to provide talented players coming up. But when we talk about next year and the potential for some of these guys, as far-fetched as it still is, like they need to continue to be willing to go spend the money, because when a superstar becomes available and you can go get them and you can put them in the middle of that lineup and then surround them with other players, that's what you've got to be willing and able to go do. Whether or not they're able to do that, especially when it's only money. When you can get these guys at free agents and all you're spending is money, you don't have to give up any prospects to do it. That's what they're going to have to do.
And you can easily convince yourself that in that system, whether you've got a superstar that can be identified today in the Cubs system is a superstar or two. And it has happened in the past where exceptional players have not been identified at the minor league level and have gone on to have really good careers and become, kind of all-star level caliber players. And so it's realistic to think there are 2 or 3 of those guys in the system. It's just when you look at the prospect value right now, you don't see it.
Right.
And so that's the problem.
Yeah. And who knows,
and that's tricky though. That's very tricky. You start trading off some of these guys and they go off and pop for other teams.
Right.
And you're sitting there kicking yourself. And so it's tough having guys like the Cubs have right now.
Yeah, but and I think though now that they've got Swanson locked up, you're looking at that for 7 years. If they extend Nico Horner, which I know they want to do, let's assume they make that happen. Let's say they lock him down for another 6 or 7 years, and you've got now your middle infield set. So now you're looking at Ed Howard, Kevin Made, Christian Hernandez, right? Maybe one of them comes up, slides over to third. Maybe one of them is a center fielder. And PCA's there, so that's not going to happen, right? All of a sudden, you've got the same situation you had with Gleyber Torres, where you're looking at making a move with one of those guys. Now, is that to add an ace pitcher? Is that to solidify a big time catcher? Although we saw, Sean Murphy just get traded. Who knows where that's coming from? Or is that just to move them all in individual pieces and go back and restock the farm in other ways? Who knows? There's a variety of ways that they can move. So they did buy themselves back maybe a little bit of leverage, for lack of a better term, with the prospect capital than what they had when they lost Canario for at least the foreseeable few months, and then Brennan Davis running into some issues as well. So, I think there's a lot of stuff they could do yet. It looks like, though, again, we heard him talk about all, the big talk about spending money and being competitive. It still looks like this is more that they're viewing this as what maybe 2015 was seen going into 2015, where it wasn't believed that they were truly going to be as competitive as what they were. They didn't think they were going to win 97 games and go to the NLCS. I think they would have been happy with being a little bit over 500, getting a few wins and getting these young guys a chance. So I think if we look at it in those terms, that's how they're viewing this. Whereas Swanson is kind of their Lester, for lack of a better term. I want to be very careful about how I say that, but if we're talking about, kind of the money and the time that's involved there, realistically, given the years in between, this is actually kind of a smaller deal, even though the numbers are bigger. But I think it's that kind of, it's the sign that we're willing to spend on some guys. And so, we think next
they're
year
not
is
going
gonna be,
all in,
yeah.
but they're definitely, not playing conservatively. They are, but they're definitely putting some chips on the table.
Yeah, it's a very calculated risk. It's kind of, if we're talking about it in those terms, you've got the nuts in poker terms, right? Not the Hoyer's got brass balls. He's just got the nuts in this situation. He knows he's got a winning hand, but he's bet conservatively into that, so as not to kind of like scare everybody off, if you look at it that way. And he's not calling anybody's big bluffs. He's not pushing all in. He didn't go after anything big on some of the other hands that he had. And so we'll see. But I think they play in a weak division. They're going to have an improved defense. I think the pitching staff, I still think they're going to lengthen that, because getting Smiley, having no true ace that's in there, I think a 6-man rotation makes a lot of sense, or kind of swinging somebody back and forth to extend that, to skip a start from somebody every once in a while. Hendricks is still very much up in the air. Who knows what's happening there and how that stuff is all going to work with the shoulder.
Last year of his contract too. So
yeah. And I think they'll, I don't even know if I'm sure I will. I shouldn't be sure that he'll be able to play, because that capsular tear in his shoulder, a lot of guys try to fix that with rest and rehab and then still end up getting surgery. So, I don't think it's out of the question that he tries to push on some of this stuff.
Yeah.
And then come February, we find out he's having shoulder surgery and he's done for the season. Now, I don't want to say that's
would
likely.
be such a bad way for him to go out, but
it'd be awful. But I don't think it's out of the question, I guess is where just based on kind of the history of the mechanism of that injury and the history of trying to let it heal. But yeah, I feel better about the Cubs than what I did, a week ago.
Yeah.
So there's that.
It's hard not to feel better.
Right. It's like, yeah,
you got much rock bottom.
You've got a week to live. Oh, well, now we found this new experimental drug that'll, give you 6 months on your life. Like, shit, just let me die.
Exactly. And if we're lucky, we'll find something else. Let's see.
Yeah, so it felt pretty bad. So anything feels better. But pending other moves. Again, they've still got to get more offense in there. And, maybe that comes from Mervis, and he comes in and hits 45 homers as a rookie, wins Rookie of the Year running away. That'd be awesome.
Yeah.
But, banking on that is probably not the best. And so, not only do they need to improve their defense at third base, they need to get some guys who you could reasonably expect to hit a minimum double-digit homers. But
20 would be good.
Yeah, I'd like to see 20 plus, but that's the thing. That's the one thing Wisdom did really well. His major identifiable skill, and why I'm surprised they didn't trade him at the deadline. Because if you have another team that's out there that needs pop for that playoff run, well, there's your man, right? And that's the one thing where I'd like to kind of see, but where does he play, right? If you're like, well, you're not going to be our everyday third baseman. Well, okay, are you going to platoon at first? Play a little bit of third?
It's tough because most playoff caliber teams have first base locked down.
Yeah.
What happens with Nick? What happens with Nick Madrigal though? There's no spot for him. He's not a bench guy. The Cubs, do the Cubs have to trade him? If they don't trade him, what happens with him?
Is he your DH? I know he doesn't bring the power that a normal, but like, are you willing to, again, everything we've, if you could put Wisdom and Madrigal together in one player, well,
that'd be great.
That'd be tremendous. But yeah, he's cheap enough that you can carry him. But here's the thing. I just mentioned the other M's, McKinstry and Mastroboni, who are both on that roster, both of whom are far more versatile.
And Morel.
Again, and Morel. Well, we know Morel's not going anywhere, but between Madrigal, McKinstry, Mastroboni, their primary spots, whether that be, second base, their primary spot, and I know some of those guys can flex to the outfield as well, but if you get a third baseman, none of their spots are open. And you can't carry all of them. You really can't.
You don't want to be on the Cubs with a last name that starts with a letter M.
Yeah.
Is basically what it comes down to.
So I wondered with Mastroboni if they would try to sneak him through, unless they already have, and I missed that one, but I don't think that's happened. And McKinstry did fine, but like, where are you going to play? Especially if they do, okay, if that's Mancini that gets added, Well, there's somebody who's probably he and Mervis are your DHs. If you get Conforto, you've got another outfielder. So there's very little room left out there, especially with Morel. And I think that you've also got Nelson Velasquez, but I assume he'll spend most or all of his time in AAA. I don't think he's he's kind of limited in terms of what he can do. So they've got to move those guys. I would love to see them try to get something done in some kind of a trade to, is that in the works? Do you go after one of the guys, one of the Blue Jays
difficult
players?
part of that is you really don't have any
spare.
leverage.
Yeah.
You lose all your leverage when other execs know that you don't have room for these guys on your roster.
He's just on the bench. But Madrigal, of all those, again, of any of those guys, he again still has the most identifiable skill in terms of his hit tool, right? And we didn't see that as well as we wanted to last year, simply because he was injured for so much, and that's another concern, right? That injury has been an issue for him. Injuries have been an issue, but with that hit tool, he does have options. They could stick him in the minors, but again, what for what? That feels like the Jackson Frazier thing last year, where they just kind of like stuck him down there for a while, and it's like, nah, this isn't going to work. Except I don't think Madrigal is a malcontent, but I don't know. I mean, that's a guy whose hit tool you'd like to. He feels like Tommy La Stella to me, where the Cubs never really had a spot for La Stella because of their middle infield at the time, and they ended up moving on from him. And look, what I
think La Stella was a better player.
Oh, he was. Yeah, I think overall, but it's that same, a tremendous hit tool, small grindy guy who at the time they didn't have a spot for, and they part with him, and then he does kind of catch fire and find out what he can really do. Although La Stella had a lot more pop, I think, than just about anybody's got more pop than Madrigal, I guess. But I'd like
you have more pop than Madrigal.
Well, yeah, pretty close. But I just don't know what you do with him. I mean, okay, he's a bench guy, but what is he going to play like once a week? I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. So, real quick, Dansby Swanson kind of feels like it saved what was turning into what could have been a riot at CubsCon, and what was really turning into a call for Jed Hoyer's head. And it feels like, you can't say this for sure, but because Swanson's fiance, was it Mallory Pugh is her name?
Mallory Swanson. If she's maybe she's plays, still Pugh. I don't know.
Plays in Chicago. Kind of feels like that was what got the Cubs Dansby Swanson. Like if she wasn't here in Chicago, would he have signed with the Cubs? We'll never know. But did Mallory Pugh save Jed Hoyer's job?
Hey, possibly he should pull a Jeter and send a gift basket over to the Red Stars offices, or
a car.
Maybe if she's in town, because that was very helpful. And here's what I'll say: while I know there's a little disappointment in terms of the Cubs effectively having to get the guy who was kind of a distant fourth on everybody's lists in terms of the
perception wise,
right?
Perception though,
but what I like, first of all, the contract is far more amenable. Although Trey Turner's contract, in retrospect, I'd rather have Trey Turner's deal than freaking Xander Bogaerts, $280 over 11 years for him, for the oldest of the group. But what I will say is this: there is absolutely, I think I will applaud the Cubs for knowing they had to get him. They missed out on the other three. Like, you miss out on this, you're down to 2 strikes now, and you fouled a couple off, right?
It's the bottom of the ninth.
You've got to get a hit here. You don't have to hit a home run. You've got to get a hit. And I think that's what they did with Swanson. I think they did a really good job with that. Hit a double to the gap, right? You didn't homer. You didn't hit a walk-off homer. Double to the gap, runner in scoring position. Game is still alive. Mm-hmm. You can still make some things happen. And I think that's what they did with the Swanson signing. I think it's a good deal.
It is. It should be fun to watch. So I had mentioned earlier that I think the Cubs will, right now, as it stands, look like they're, about a 500 level team. They could be a few games above 500. You get to 85 wins, maybe. What are you thinking?
Yeah,
Early
I think
predictions.
I think right now I'm putting them at like 83.
Okay.
A little over 500. I think that's
Which
where
is might be good enough to get into the playoffs.
it could be, and I think that's where I look at it right now. I think they're good enough for that. To me, that's right. It could be 75 wins, right? I'm not saying they will win 83, or I think they can do that if things break
They
well.
won a few more games last year than we thought they were going to
Yeah,
win. They won 74. I thought they were around a 70 win team. And so, I think you could easily see them around 85 wins or so. I mean, if they start hot, who knows, right? They go
yeah,
10-1 to start.
yeah. And if they add a couple more guys and things, hey, what if Bellinger gets, but not MVP level, rookie of the year level, but what if he gets back to 2020?
Yeah, what if he's
right?
batting 270 with 25 home
25
runs?
homers and great defense? And what if
I think
Suzuki
everyone would take that,
figures it out,
including him.
Yeah. If Suzuki gets to what, again, maybe not to what he was in NPB, but it makes those improvements. What if Matt Mervis comes in and does some of the same mashing that he did in the minors?
Yeah.
Right.
And the
what
Cubs
if
pitching could absolutely dominate.
Yeah. I mean,
They
we
have
saw
a
what their
staff
numbers
that could
were.
really dominate.
If you look at what their numbers were, right, I'll say this. I know a lot of people, maybe it's still, I don't want to put salt in the wound on the Wilson Contreras stuff, but if you look at what the pitchers who threw to both Contreras and Gomes, and you look at their numbers between those two, there's a stark difference between them. And it very much favors Gomes. And I've said this on here before, is that if they already knew they wanted to move away from Contreras, but the way that pitching staff performed when Contreras was out for that month with the ankle issue, I think iced everything. It was like, we're good. Because that's a lot of offense to lose.
Yeah.
But again, as we mentioned, if you're talking about like basically just slicing a run off the ERA and going, okay. And that's where I think a lot of people look at this stuff, in terms of, they'll look at framing numbers, they'll look at, all these other publicly available metrics and be like, oh, this catcher sucks, or, why would you sign this guy? I think when you look at a coaching staff, that's led by a catcher, you got Craig Driver as the strategy coach / kind of assist, catching coach, right? I mean, he's a catcher. You got Carter Hawkins, who's a pitching whisperer, pitching guru guy, right? He's obviously very involved in catching. I think you have a coaching staff that is very much involved in and interested in, what does this player at the catching position, what do they bring? Because Ross was kind of that guy, right? When they were running with 3 catchers early on, and he actually hit really well. If you look at his offensive numbers, they're actually really strong, but he was that backup guy, right? He was there. The Cubs didn't bring him in to be a slugger. They didn't bring him in to be some dude who picked everybody off, but they brought him in to be a leader and to make a difference in other ways. And I think when you look at the players they've added, they're valuing a lot of those things. So again, that's kind of an interesting wrinkle to this as I look at some of these players they've added, that it is most definitely about more than just specifically what stats do they bring. And that hey, they've talked about it before, man. There are things, chemistry can be overrated, but if you're looking at trying to make these little tiny improvements and kind of what can we tweak around the margins, that does, I mean, it plays a role in these teams' decisions. It absolutely does.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. It'll be fun once the, I mean, we're kind of in a period here where I wouldn't expect the Cubs to make any signings. Maybe they do, but I don't know. It's the 20th. Christmas is on Sunday. You kind of got to think that you're not going to hear anything happen until the beginning of the year, and then kind of after that. Speaking of which, with the holidays and everything coming up, I think we may be taking our winter break here on the rant. Probably get back. I would say I am leaving town for 2 weeks after Christmas, and we'll be back. So we're probably going to be having a show. The next show would be the week of the 9th, January 9th. That week, which is also
baby.
CubsCon. Yeah, which is also CubsCon week.
Look out.
So, yeah. So, that could be a very active week for the Cubs. I mean, again, we're not going to see any major signings because there are no major signings to be done anymore. But we may see some additions, hopefully, that week or shortly thereafter, because the Cubs really do need to shore up third base, as we were mentioning, and maybe even get that catcher taken care of. So we'll see on that. But otherwise, Evan, have a wonderful Christmas and Christmas cheer. You said you're just staying in at home.
Yeah, we're just gonna
be snowed in.
Yeah, probably. We may not be able to leave. So yes, it should work out well. I bought entirely too much crap for my kids, and
okay. You have a lot of booze?
Yeah, I do. I actually got some Jefferson's Ocean bourbon that I cracked into a little bit. I've got some Maker's Mark cask strength. I've got probably need to pick up some more. Got plenty of beer. Got about 60 some bottles and cans of different barrel aged stuff. So
if you're gonna get snowed in, that's the way to do it.
I'm good. Yeah. So if anybody needs to come over and, I've got the main supplies. I think I might just go get some Spam, so we got plenty of stuff.
Firewood?
You can't get out. I got firewood. I got no place to burn it, but I got firewood. So if I'm snowed in, I'm not going to start a fire. We got a gas log though. So,
there you go.
Hey, I'll be able to make that work. Oh, and then you froze up on. Maybe it's me. Maybe I froze. Did I freeze?
I think we all froze there for a second.
There we go.
Kind of like the Cubs, in there.
And then we just got to thaw. We just got to wait till like March, and then maybe it'll thaw.
Yeah, it'll thaw. All right, well, cool. Everyone have a great Christmas. Thanks for being around all year. Have a fantastic New Year, and we'll see you guys on the other side of 2023.
Cool. Merry Christmas to everybody but Kyle. See ya.
See ya. Got to get. See, it's technical.
Maybe. There we go.